The war had ended, but the silence was not peaceful. Ash and dust floated through the air as the human man walked slowly across the ruined alien city. His name was Elias, a former soldier, tired and alone. He had seen too much, lost too much. And now he just wanted to disappear. The buildings were broken, metal beams twisted like vines. Fires still burned in corners of the streets, and the sky above was always gray. He was not looking for anything. Just food, or maybe a place to rest. But then, he heard a soft sound. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a scream. It was a small cry, like someone calling for help. Elias stopped, listening, again. The sound came. It was weak, soft, and full of pain. He turned toward it and walked carefully, rifle in hand. He moved pieces of fallen stone, stepped over broken glass. Behind a collapsed wall, he saw her. A small alien girl, no older than 5. Her skin was pale blue, her dress torn, and one leg was trapped under rubble. Her eyes, big and shining, looked up at him in fear and hope. Elias froze. She didn't move, didn't speak. He could see she had no weapons, no implants, nothing dangerous. She was just a child. For a moment, he thought of leaving. This was not his problem. But then she opened her mouth. Her voice was dry, barely a whisper. "Will you be my father?" she asked. Elias blinked. He didn't expect that. Not a scream, not a cry for help. But that question, she was trembling, her tiny hand holding a broken toy. He knelt down slowly. "Can you move your leg?" he asked softly. She shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. The rubble was too heavy for her. Elias looked around. No one else was nearby. No enemies, no other survivors. Just him and her, alone in the ruins. He placed his rifle on the ground and began lifting the stone. It was heavy and his arms burned, but he kept going, bit by bit. The weight came off. The girl didn't cry, didn't make a sound, just watched him with those big eyes. Finally, he freed her leg. It was bruised, but not broken. He took out a small bandage from his pack and wrapped it gently. Then, he picked her up, light as a feather. "You don't have to talk right now," he said. "I'll get you somewhere safe." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her arms wrapping around his neck. She didn't say anything more, but in that quiet moment, something inside Elias shifted. He had lost his own daughter years ago, during Earth's fall. This child reminded him of her. The same small hands, the same soft voice. Maybe it was just fate, or maybe it was something more. As he walked, he checked his scanner. Storms were coming, and this city wasn't safe. He had to find shelter before nightfall. They moved through the rubble, the girl's toy dangling from her fingers. Elias kept one hand on his gun, the other holding her close. He found an old bunker half covered in dirt. It looked strong enough to survive the night. Inside, it was cold and dark, but it was better than being outside. He sat her down gently and gave her a piece of protein bar. She took it with both hands and ate slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "You don't have to call me father," Elias said quietly, "but if you want, I can stay." She smiled a little. It was weak but real. Then she whispered again, "Thank you, Papa." Elias didn't correct her. He just nodded, looking at the bunker door. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, a new bond had quietly formed, a bond not of blood, but of choice. And as he sat beside her in the darkness, Elias knew one thing. He would not leave her. Not now, not ever. The war may have taken everything from him, but in the middle of ruin, he had found something new. Someone who needed him, and maybe, just maybe, someone he needed too. Rain fell over the bunker roof as Elias watched the little girl sleep beside him, curled up in the corner, holding her broken toy close to her chest. He had stayed awake the whole night, keeping guard, listening to every sound in the distance. Something about her question kept echoing in his mind. "Will you be my father?" He had said nothing then, but now in the quiet, her words began to feel heavier. She was small, alone, and completely dependent on him. He didn't even know her name. She hadn't spoken again since calling him Papa when the morning came. Elias stood up and gently shook her awake. She blinked up at him, sleepy and confused. He gave her water, then said softly, "You need a name." She tilted her head, as if the idea felt new to her. "I'm Elias," he said, touching his chest. "And you?" "I'll call you Luma." The name came from his memories. It was what he would have named his daughter if she had lived. The little alien girl looked at him, and for a moment, it seemed like she understood. She smiled, just a little, then repeated the word softly, "Luma." That was enough. The name became real from that moment. He took her hand and they left the bunker, moving quickly toward the forest outside the city ruins. He knew the Empire might send scouts, drones, or worse. He couldn't stay in one place too long, not with her. They walked for hours through thick trees and quiet paths. Elias stopped at an old outpost, broken, half-eaten by nature, but enough to rest. He made a small fire and cooked dry rations while Luma played with sticks and stones. She didn't speak much, only small sounds and hums. But he watched her carefully, the way she moved, the way she looked at things. She was different. Not just in how she looked. There was something strange, something quiet and powerful about her. Her eyes would glow faintly at night, not enough to scare, but enough to notice. She sometimes stared at old machines like she could understand them. Later that night, Elias heard something buzzing in the sky. He quickly pulled Luma into the shadows as a drone passed overhead. Scanning the ground, she didn't scream, didn't cry. Instead, she reached out her hand and touched the ground. Beside her, the drone paused, lights flickering. Then suddenly it turned and flew away, as if it had seen nothing. Elias stared at her, breathing hard. "What did you just do?" he asked, voice low. She looked up at him, blinking, then whispered, "I didn't want them to find us." Her voice was soft, but clear. That was the second time she had spoken, and this time there was no fear. Elias didn't know whether to be afraid or amazed. He knelt in front of her. "Luma, who are you?" She looked away, hugging her toy again. "I don't know." But Elias didn't believe that. He had fought in wars, seen alien tech, powerful beings, weapons beyond reason, but nothing like this child. She had hidden something. Deep and strange. He wondered if she was dangerous or just gifted, maybe both. But no matter what she was, she had trusted him. She had asked him to be her father. And he had picked her up from the ruins without asking for anything in return. Now they were connected, even if he didn't understand why. He sighed and looked at the sky. Stars blinked faintly through the clouded night. The war was over, but for him, something new had begun. Something with no maps, no orders, no missions. Just a strange little girl and the promise he hadn't spoken aloud, but had already made. He would protect her, whatever it took, even if the galaxy came after them, even if it meant running forever. Because when she said his name again, just before sleep, Papa, Elias knew he could never leave her side. They had been hiding in the forest for 5 days, moving only when the sky turned orange or when the wind shifted wrong. Elias was careful, always scanning the trees, watching for patrols, scanning for drones. But even with all his training, even with all his instincts, something had changed. The silence was heavier now, like something unseen was watching them from far away. Luma walked beside him, small steps, always quiet. She had not spoken much again, just smiled sometimes. She still carried that same broken toy, never letting it go, and every night, she placed it beside her like it was something sacred. One morning, as they rested near a dry stream bed, Elias pulled out his datapad. He tried to connect to an old satellite, just to check if any parts of the network still worked. Static filled the screen, but then something blinked. His own face appeared, grainy and blurred. Wanted, human male kidnapping, royal bloodline, dead or alive. The bounty number made his heart stop. It was high, far too high for a simple soldier. His hands shook slightly as he read it again. Someone had put a price on his head, not for his past, but for Luma, They were calling it kidnapping. They thought he had stolen her, and worse. They said she was of royal blood. He looked at Luma, sitting near the fire, humming to herself. She didn't look royal, not like the stories said, but now it made sense, her strange powers. The way she could silence a drone, the way her eyes glowed softly when she dreamed. He didn't want to believe it. She was just a child, a lost little girl who had asked him to be her father. But the galaxy didn't care about that. They saw her as a tool, a key, maybe a threat. Later that day, Elias wrapped her in a cloak and led her toward a nearby town. They needed food, new clothes, and maybe answers. He wore a hood, kept his face low. Luma stayed close, holding his hand tightly. The town was small, hidden between hills and metal towers. Shops were open. People walked fast, ignoring each other. Elias walked straight into a marketplace. He picked up some fruit, paid with old credits, and hoped no one looked too hard, but someone did. A tall man with silver skin and glowing eyes watched them from a booth. He said nothing, but slowly reached under the table. Elias saw the motion from the corner of his eye. He had seconds, maybe less. He turned to Luma, whispered quickly, "Stay behind me." Then a loud voice shouted, "That's him, the human with the girl." Everything exploded. People ran, alarms rang, and 3 bounty hunters charged toward them. Elias pulled his pistol and fired a warning shot into the air. He grabbed Luma and ran through the back alleys, weaving between crates and hanging wires. The hunters chased them hard, shouting commands in a language Elias didn't know. One of them fired a net, but it missed, tangling in a wall. Luma kept up, her steps fast and steady, but Elias knew they couldn't run forever. He ducked into an old storage shed and slammed the door shut. Breathing hard, he looked at her. "Luma," he whispered, "they're after you, not me." She looked down, guilty. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said. "I didn't know I was special." Elias knelt beside her, his voice calm but serious. "You're not just special, Luma," he said. "You're important. I don't care who you were born to, I'm not giving you up." She stared at him, eyes wide, full of light and confusion. Then, she stepped forward and placed her tiny hand on his chest. "I can protect you too," she said softly. "But you'll see something scary. Something I didn't mean to show anyone." Before he could ask what she meant, the shed walls began to hum, a low sound like an engine waking up after years of sleep. The lights flickered, metal cracked, and the floor beneath them started to glow. Elias stood still, holding her tight as the world around them changed. He didn't know what was happening, but one thing was certain: he was now deep in something far bigger than war, and Luma was far more than a lost little girl. Asterisk. The storage shed was no longer just a shed. The walls had changed, melted away like mist. Elias stood frozen as the metal faded and turned into smooth silver light. They were now in a round room with no doors, no windows, and no shadows. Luma held his hand, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. "I didn't mean to bring us here," she said quietly. "It just happened." Elias looked around, heart racing. "What is this place?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, strange shapes began to float in the air, like glass cymbals spinning slowly. They moved around Luma like they recognized her. Elias reached out to touch one, but it blinked and disappeared. A soft hum filled the room, followed by a voice, not from Luma, not from him. It was deep, cold, and not human. Identity match confirmed. Bloodline recognized. Heir of the lost line has returned. Elias stepped back, one hand on his weapon. Luma just stared up, eyes wide but calm. "I've heard that voice before," she whispered. "In my dreams." The room pulsed again, and one of the floating symbols landed gently on her palm. Her body lit up with soft blue energy, lines tracing her arms like living light. Elias watched, not knowing whether to stop it or let it continue. She looked so small, but in that moment, she didn't seem weak. Then she fell. Her legs gave out and she collapsed in his arms. The lights vanished. The room turned cold again. He held her tightly, calling her name. "Luma, stay with me, come on." She didn't respond, just breathed softly. The voice returned. "Systems active. Primary key restored. Protection protocol unlocked." Suddenly the silver walls faded, and they were back in the broken shed. Elias looked around. Everything was just as it was, except now the floor was cracked in a perfect circle. Luma slowly opened her eyes, her voice weak. "I didn't want you to see that." "Now they'll know." "Who?" Elias asked. She sat up slowly, holding her head. "The ones who tried to erase my kind," she whispered. "The ones who fear my blood." Elias helped her up, his mind spinning. He had heard rumors during the war, ancient beings who ruled before the Empire. A forgotten bloodline with powers that could control machines, even warp space. He never believed those stories. Until now, Luma had triggered something old and alive, and now others would be coming. Not just bounty hunters, real monsters. Real threats. Those who wanted her gone forever. They didn't wait. Elias picked her up and carried her out of the town, through the hills and far into the woods. By the time the sun fell, he found an old cave hidden behind a wall of vines. Inside, he wrapped her in a blanket and sat close. Weapon in hand, she looked at him with tired eyes. "Are you scared of me now?" she asked. He shook his head. "No," he said softly. "I'm scared for you." She reached for his hand, small fingers wrapping around his rough palm. "Do you still want to be my father?" She whispered. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he gave a small smile. "More than ever," he said outside. Something passed through the trees. A black shadow, almost invisible, moving without sound. Far above, in orbit, a signal pulsed. Quietly through the stars, the ancient systems had spoken again, and now the galaxy had heard. Luma was awake, and she was no longer hiding alone. She had someone beside her now, someone who would fight, someone who would stay, even if the galaxy burned. The cave was quiet, but Elias couldn't sleep. Luma was resting beside him, her breathing slow, her tiny hands still holding his shirt. He stared at the fire he had built, small flames dancing in the dark. His mind was spinning with questions, too many to count. What had she become? No, what had she always been? He had seen power before, seen warships burn entire cities, seen creatures that could crush tanks, but nothing like Luma. She had awakened something ancient, something buried for ages, and now her presence was like a signal, a call to things he didn't understand. Elias needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them. An old friend who once betrayed him, a man named Kale. Kale had been a data smuggler during the war. He dealt in secrets. Maps, stolen science, things people were killed for. Elias hated him, but Kale knew how to dig into things no one else could. If Luma was truly the heir of a forgotten bloodline, Kale would know. At sunrise, Elias packed their things and gently woke Luma. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Are we running again?" she asked softly. "No," he said. "We're going to find someone." They traveled for 2 days, crossing frozen hills and burned valleys. Once, they passed a field filled with broken machines, each one covered in vines. Luma stopped and touched one, and it lit up for a moment, then went silent again. Elias watched her in silence, a feeling growing in his chest he didn't know how to name. On the 3rd day, they reached a ruined city built into the side of a cliff. It was a dead place, no people, no lights, only whispers of wind. But Elias knew the code. He tapped 4 times on a rusted panel beside a sealed door. Then 3 more. A voice came from the shadows, cold and smooth. "Elias? That really you? Thought you were dead." Kale stepped into the light, older now, half his face replaced with metal. He looked at Luma and raised a brow. "This her?" Kale asked. Elias nodded. Kale chuckled. "You've got some fire under your feet. Friend, she's not a weapon," Elias said sharply. "She's a child." Kale didn't argue, just turned and walked deeper into the bunker. Inside, lights flickered, screens glowed. and wires ran across the floor like veins. Kale waved his hand over a scanner, and a hidden lab opened. "Put her hand here," he said, pointing at a strange device. Elias hesitated, but Luma stepped forward. She placed her hand on the scanner, and the machine came alive. Symbols flashed some Elias had seen in the glowing room before. The screen turned red, then blue, then white. Kale's eyes widened. "Oh no," he whispered. "She's not just royalty. She's the core." "The what?" Elias asked. Kale turned slowly, face pale. "She's the last of a race called the Ancients. They built the first starships, the first cities, the first languages. They didn't rule with war, they ruled with thought, with voice. And she's the final one." Luma looked down quiet. "I don't remember any of that," she said. "You wouldn't." Kale replied. "They hid you, broke your memories, scattered your people. But the moment you woke, you called the old systems back online." Kale walked over to Elias, voice low. "There's more," he said. "Her presence will cause war. Elias, governments, pirates, empires, they'll all want her dead or controlled." Elias clenched his fists. "Then I'll protect her." Kale looked him in the eyes, serious now. "Or you could give her up, put her in stasis, keep her hidden for 100 years. Let someone else deal with it." "No," Elias said, voice like steel. "She trusted me." Luma walked up and took his hand again, her grip warm and small. Kale sighed. "Then you better leave now. I'll wipe the scans, burn the data, and say you never came." As they left the lab, Kale called out one last warning. "She's not just your daughter anymore, Elias. She's the future, and the galaxy's already looking for her." Elias didn't turn back. He lifted Luma into his arms and disappeared into the night. Storms rumbled in the distance, and ships crossed the sky above. But none of that mattered. He had made his choice, and he would stay by her side, no matter what came next. The night air was heavy with smoke. The stars above were hidden behind black clouds. Elias moved fast through the old forest trail. Luma held tight against his chest. They had left Kale's hideout just hours ago, but something already felt wrong. He didn't hear birds, didn't hear insects, only silence, and that kind of silence only came when someone was watching or waiting. Luma rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes half closed. She had been quiet since Kale told her the truth, that she was more than royal, more than a child. She was the last of the Ancients. Elias still couldn't believe it, but the truth had a way of making itself louder with time. The trail ended near a small valley surrounded by metal towers. Elias had hidden a ship there. Old and dusty, but still working. He planned to leave the planet tonight, to take Luma somewhere far beyond the maps, beyond reach. But as he stepped into the open, lights flashed across the hilltops. Voices shouted, weapons charged. A dozen soldiers surrounded them in seconds, armor shining and guns raised. Elias cursed under his breath, pulling Luma behind him. From behind the group, a figure stepped forward. It was Kale. Elias stared at him in disbelief. "You said you erased the scans," he growled. Kale gave a small, tired smile. "I lied," he said. "I had to. Do you know what she is worth?" Luma looked up, confused. Elias moved in front of her like a shield. "She's a child," he said, voice hard. "She's not for sale," Kale shrugged. "Then you should have never brought her to me." The soldiers moved closer. Elias raised his weapon, ready to fight even if it meant dying. But before a single shot was fired, Luma stepped out from behind him. Her hands glowed, and the air around her shifted. She raised one palm slowly, and every weapon in the valley powered down. At once, the soldiers froze, looking at their rifles in confusion. Kale's smile faded. "What are you doing?" he asked, stepping back. Luma's eyes were full of light, not anger, not fear, just calm. "I told you I could protect him," she said quietly, "but I didn't want to hurt anyone." The ground began to rumble. The towers around them shook. Machines melted into the soil like wax under fire, and the wind itself carried her voice like an echo from the past. You shouldn't have tried to take me. Kale dropped to his knees. The metal parts of his body sparking. Elias stood still, staring at her in awe. She wasn't glowing now. She was light. She was becoming something else, something both beautiful and terrifying. Then, all at once, it stopped. The lights faded. The earth calmed. The machines turned to ash. The soldiers had fainted or fled. And Kale lay silent, breathing but broken. Luma swayed where she stood, her strength nearly gone. Elias caught her before she fell. Her head rested on his chest, and she whispered, "I didn't want to be like them. The ones who used power to rule." "You're not," Elias said, holding her close. "You're not like them." He looked down at Kale one last time, then walked toward the hidden ship. No one tried to stop them. The path ahead was clear. But it wouldn't stay that way for long. As they lifted into the sky, Luma slept deeply, outside. Stars passed by the window, and for the first time in days, Elias allowed himself to breathe. But even as they left the planet behind, he knew what was coming. They had made enemies, and now Luma's power had been seen. The galaxy would come for her again. But next time, it wouldn't be just bounty hunters or traders. Next time, it would be empires, and Elias would be ready. The ship moved quietly through the stars. No alarms, no enemies, just a long silence between galaxies. Elias sat in the cockpit, watching space pass by like an endless ocean. Behind him, Luma slept, her small frame wrapped in a blanket, her breathing soft. They had escaped, but Elias knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Luma's power had awakened something far bigger than bounty hunters or traders. Old machines were waking up across forgotten systems. Ancient signals were lighting up after centuries of silence. And one of them had found their ship. It started with a small flicker on the screen. Then a strange symbol appeared, one Elias didn't recognize. Then came the voice, deep and cold. "Guardian of the air, your vessel has been identified. Prepare for retrieval." Elias jumped to his feet and ran to the sleeping chamber. Luma was already awake, sitting up, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "I heard it too," she said quietly. "They're not coming to hurt us. But they will take me away." "No," Elias said, shaking his head. "No one's taking you anywhere." Luma looked at him with sad eyes. "They've been waiting for me." "Elias," she said, "I felt it when I touched the old systems. They think I belong to them." Elias knelt down in front of her. "You belong with me," he said, "not because of what you are, but because of who you are. You're not a tool, not a queen, not a weapon. You're just Luma." Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded slowly. The ship shook as something massive pulled them from hyperspace. A structure larger than a moon appeared ahead, silent, silver, shaped like a great ring in the dark. A docking signal forced the ship to stop, and a beam of light pulled them toward an opening. Elias held Luma's hand as they stepped into the chamber. It was quiet, empty, but not dead. Lights floated in the air like stars, and a voice echoed again. "Child of the first race, you are home." Luma squeezed Elias's hand. "I don't want to go if it means losing you," she whispered. Elias looked at the glowing walls, the great machine intelligence all around them. No one said we had to follow their rules. He said, a figure formed in front of them, made of light and code. Not a person, but a memory, a caretaker of the ancients. It spoke without emotion. She must undergo memory reactivation. Her full self will return. The guardian will be erased. "No," Elias said, stepping forward. "You're not taking anything from her. She's already herself. She's more human than half the galaxy." Luma took a breath and stepped beside him. "You don't decide who I am," she said, her voice steady. "I choose." And just like that, the lights dimmed. The figure paused, as if unsure. Then it said something new, something unexpected. Choice acknowledged. Luma looked up at Elias and smiled. "I want to go home," she said. "Not their home. Ours." The chamber opened. The docking beam broke. The ship was free again. They returned to space, leaving the great machine behind. No one chased them. No one called them back. Weeks passed, and they found a quiet planet with green fields and soft winds. Elias built a small house near a stream. Luma helped him plant trees and feed animals. She laughed more now, spoke more, and sometimes sang to the stars. At night, Elias would sit on the porch while she leaned on his arm. Sometimes she'd ask, "Do you think they'll ever come again?" And he'd say, "Let them try." He had once been a soldier, a fighter, a man with no home, but now he was something else. He was her father, and that was more powerful than anything the galaxy could throw at him.